Welcome to Healthy Buzz, the podcast for women who are craving honest answers in a supportive community. Hosted by Brandy Homerding, a certified nutrition therapy practitioner who believes your body isn't broken, but the narrative around women's health is. Each week, we're diving deep into holistic health topics, challenging the one-size-fits-all approach, and empowering you to trust your own informed intuition. Get ready to feel seen, supported, and seriously informed. This is Healthy Buzz, where collaboration meets unfiltered transparency in women's health. Welcome to the very first episode of Healthy Buzz. Today we're kicking off Healthy Buzz by getting right to the heart of it all. I am telling you my story. I'm opening up about my personal health evolution, the missteps, the revelations, and the journey that transformed my understanding of what it truly means to be well. Changing the narrative around women's health is the absolute driving force behind everything that I do, especially why I created Healthy Buzz. So in this premiere episode, I'm going to be peeling back the layers and sharing my full story. Transparency, vulnerability, all of it. From the confusing beginnings, the turning point, and the aha moments that really shaped my approach to holistic nutrition and women's wellness. So if you're ready, let's dive in. So we have to rewind a little bit of time here. We can't just jump into the present day. I kind of need to give you a background as to what it was like for me that put me on this journey. So I grew up in the 80s and 90s on a farm in Iowa. It was a rural setting, but we were not isolated. We were 10 minutes from our local town and about 20 minutes from a town that had a bigger grocery store. There was not a lot of focus on nutrition. We did eat really well. My mom was a great cook. We had a huge garden, but there wasn't a whole lot of emphasis on quote unquote healthy eating. And in fact, when I look back at the types of snacks that we had in our house, Little Debbie snack cakes were definitely a highlight. They were always on hand. They were always in the pantry. There was a lot of processed foods that we had for snacks. We chose not to have a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables, nuts, seeds, things like that as snack options. But then also looking at what my life was like growing up, there was a lot of silence at home when it came to what was going on with my body, what was happening with my menstrual cycle. Sex ed was, we did not talk about sex. I was not allowed to go to even the sex ed class in school. So there was this lack of discussion around menstruation. My only exposure to menstruation was in fourth grade. I remember the talk of puberty, right? So the boys went to one classroom, the girls went to Mrs. Brown's classroom, and we watched a video all about menstruation and getting your period and what that was like. I remember absolutely nothing about that video. What I do remember is receiving this bag that had pads and tampons on it. And of course the bag you couldn't see through it. So just all of a sudden this immense feeling of shame around my body and periods. And it was kind of confusing. And it was kind of giving this message around we need to hide our menstrual products as well. And we had to have separate conversations in the boys. Why we weren't all in the same room to learn all together, I will never understand that. I think that was a huge misstep for everybody learning more about their bodies, is if we could all learn together. But I also see what's maybe some benefits of having that separate environment could be. So since there was so much hush-hush in my family and in my environment, I had to turn to the resources I had available. Since I didn't feel comfortable talking to my friends about the changes that were happening with my body. I did have an older sister, but again, the family didn't talk about periods and menstrual cycles and what's going on in hormones and all that good stuff. So I turned to YM and 17 magazine. That was my resource to learn what was going on with my body, because the internet then was not what the internet is now. The internet was really basic. Yes, I remember when we got the internet in my home, but it was not used for learning about periods and hormones. So I turned to the things that I had access to. And it was when I got my period, was I believe the summer between 7th and 8th grade. And my mom worked overnight, and so she came home from work, and like I was in bed and bleeding and cramping, and she came up to me, and I don't know how she knew. It could have been because of the large amount of laundry I had created, because I was literally bleeding through all my clothes because I wasn't quite exactly sure. Maybe I was in denial as to what was happening with my body. And so she was like, "Did you start your period?" And I was like, "Yes." And she said, "Okay, well, the pads and tampons are in the bathroom. Do you know where they're at?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Okay." And that was the end of the conversation. It never went past that conversation. And in speaking with a lot of my friends now, I've learned that a lot of them had the same experience where their parents felt, I don't know, like this, they didn't quite know how to approach the conversation, likely because the conversation was never approached with them. And I had this conversation with my mom the other day, and I'm like, "Why didn't we ever talk about periods and stuff?" And she's like, "Well, I never had that experience either. Like, my mom never really talked to us about periods in our bodies either." So it was just kind of this cycle that was perpetuated in our family. Because I know it's not the same for everybody. I've talked to other friends. I've heard other stories of women who have a completely different first period experience. So through that process, I was trying to understand what's happening in my body, going to YM magazines to learn a little bit more about my body, and still feeling this immense shame around my period. I remember shoving a tampon up the sleeve of my sweatshirt for so many years, even well into my adulthood, as I like need to go to the bathroom to change my tampon. And so I can't let anybody know that I'm bleeding. God forbid we ever let anybody know that we're bleeding, because there's such a stigma attached to this idea of having a period, and a wrong misconception. And I'm hoping that we can really start changing the narrative around women's health and around periods, and that they're actually not a bad thing. So when I went off to college, I started birth control because I did not understand my body. And I remember when I had the conversation with my parents about like, "Hey, I want to start birth control," I use the excuse of like, because I have really bad periods. And so I heard that they can make your periods better. And that was partially true. I did have really bad periods. They were really heavy. They were, like I said, I was bleeding through my clothes all the time. Like, I remember in junior high, my mom having to come pick me up from school because I bled through my clothes again. Or I was like, just felt like I was dying from cramps. So I started birth control, not because I understood my body, but because I didn't understand my body. And I chose to stay on birth control for the next 17 years. Some form of birth control. But I remember that time when I started, I was kind of hopping around. I was trying different pill combinations, right? Because there was a lot of different options available. But I didn't ever feel like any of them worked, quote unquote, worked well, because I was still having like spotting during mid-cycle, or even still having pretty bad periods on that week that you're bleeding. I didn't know that week that you bleed was not a true period. I didn't learn that. No one talked to me and told me about that. With the hormonal birth control, the birth control pill that I was taking was masking a lot of my symptoms. It was trying to put a Band-Aid on a situation. It wasn't addressing the root cause of my situation. So through that whole situation of like going to college, getting on these different birth controls, I also started, for the first time, moved my body intentionally for a workout. Like, I hadn't ever had to do that when I was in high school. I was very active in high school. I was in sports. And so there wasn't ever an issue when it came to weight management when I think about like just my activity level. Going to college, my eating habits became different. My movement became different. And so for the first time, I actually moved my body intentionally because I wanted to be more active, and I was desiring a change in the aesthetics of how it looked. Because freshman 15, the good old saying, oh, they went to college and they gained the freshman 15, the 15 pounds that you gain in the freshman year. I don't know if they still say that anymore. That's what they said when I graduated high school in 2000. So I don't even know if that's still the case. But that's where things really started to unfold about what my relationship with food really started to look like. So while I was moving my body differently, I didn't necessarily change the way I ate. I went to the rec center, I went to a couple classes, and then by my fourth year in college, I was at a different college, I started running. And I was doing that movement because I didn't love that rec center at the second college I went to. So once I graduated college, now, like even more freedom is now available. And my focus on food became, how could I consume less? And at that point in my life, fat was really a bad thing. So everything was like low fat. So this is the era where I was eating baked lays with lean pockets and lean cuisines and low fat yogurts. Like everything was low fat. I was really diving into the low calorie thing as well. I mean, the 100-calorie packs, the Snackwell cookies, like everything that I was doing to fuel, what I was using to fuel my body was a lot of processed foods. Wasn't really focused on whole foods. And so I was still moving my body with an intention of like, I'm intentionally working out. But that's when I also started using things like MyFitnessPal. And MyFitnessPal is a slippery slope, my friend. You tell it the weight that you're desiring to lose, and it will tell you how many calories you should consume and or cut in a day in order to have that weight loss. So it became this game. It became a game of, if I go to the gym after work and I do the elliptical for an hour, that will give me enough calories banked that I can eat more for supper, or I can have some ice cream. It was kind of like this negotiation that started happening. And so it was always like I had to work out for at least 45 minutes, if not an hour. And it became this kind of this cycle of this reward system. And it wasn't sustainable. It wasn't something that I enjoyed doing either. Because there was also this mentality that I created. And I remember saying all the time, calories don't count on the weekend. Because I spent so much time restricting Monday through Thursday that by the time Friday, Saturday, Sunday rolled around, there was no guardrails. I literally ate and drank whatever I wanted. I didn't track then, because then there would be all of the shame and guilt associated with it. And I just had this like free for all. And then come again on Monday, the old saying, my diet starts on Monday, would creep back in, and the whole cycle would repeat itself. I will say there was a lot of emphasis on cardio for me at this time as well. I did a lot of cardio. This is when I started some of my training when it came to running, which I'll get into here in just a little bit. But I will say, I also started lifting weights at this time. There was a class at the rec center called Body Pump, and I started doing that once a week, and I really enjoyed it. So I will give myself props for picking up weights in my 20s, and it's something I still really enjoy doing today. So when I finish college, I'm entering the workforce, and my career is in healthcare. I have 16 years in healthcare, and 14 of those years was as an interventional radiology tech. So I started off as a diagnostic x-ray tech, And then 2 years into that, I became an interventional radiology tech. And as an interventional radiology tech, I was assisting the radiologist to perform minor surgical procedures that utilize X-ray, ultrasound, and CAT scan guidance. So it was a really great learning experience. I learned so much about the human body, about different disease processes. Like it's a really, it was a great elevation in my career from the diagnostic tech to the interventional radiology tech situation. But along with that came a lot of call. So it was a lot of working long hours. It was a lot of getting called in the middle of the night. It was a lot of picking up extra call shifts. This was a time in my life where I was embracing that hustle culture like no other. I was wearing that busy badge and I was wearing it proudly. I was running on very little sleep. I used to always say, I can sleep when I die. Ugh. So I was running on like 4 or 5 hours of sleep at night. I was packing my calendar full of social events. I was working really long shifts. I was picking up all the extra call because I really like to help. But I started to realize 14 years, we're probably 12 years into that, hey, I am really starting to burn out in this career field. I'm really starting to burn the candle at both ends. I also was really not feeling my body very well. I remember still eating those low calorie, low fat yogurt for breakfast. And then 45 minutes later, I would be starving. Yeah, there's a reason why I was only eating like 150 calories for breakfast. So during that whole time, I am now shifting into picking up a new hobby of running because the plate's already full. Why not add something else to it, right? So I started running and I became a very avid runner. By the time everything was said and done, before I ran my last race, I had ran 13 half marathons, 1 full marathon, and it really became a significant part of my identity. It became who I was. I was always, every year I had to train for a race. I had to have something to look forward to. I think there was one year that I ended up running 3 half marathons in a year. I wasn't doing it right. I was looking back, I was overtraining. I was underfueling, 100% not fueling my body properly. I was not resting. I was not giving my body that recovery time. And it started to really have a negative impact on my body. During this whole time span, I'm also still on hormonal birth control. But I had shifted. I had shifted from the pill to an IUD. So I started having conversations in my 20s, late 20s with friends, a little bit more about hormones because I was super curious. I've always been super curious. And learned about the IUD and that if you have this certain IUD, then you can avoid having a period. And I was like, that sounds kind of cool. Because I was still having a period, quote unquote, with the birth control pill. Again, I didn't know that it was just a withdrawal bleed. It wasn't an actual period because a true period follows ovulation. With the hormonal birth control pill, you are not ovulating. That's how it works. It blocks ovulation. So that week that you're taking the placebo pills, well, that's just a withdrawal bleed that your body is withdrawing from the synthetic hormones when you're taking those sugar pills. So I made an appointment with my OBGYN and I had the conversation about, hey, I would really like to check out an IUD. And I remember the conversation vaguely kind of was around well, which IUD would you like? And I was like, well, I don't know. What are my options? So that's when I learned that there was a Mirena IUD, which is hormonal based, and the Paragard IUD, which is made of copper. So I inquired and I said, well, what's the difference between them? How do they work? And so she explained to me that the Mirena IUD was releasing a hormone in your uterus to prevent pregnancy from happening. Whereas the Paragard is a copper IUD, and copper can make the environment really inhospitable for sperm. So she also told me that with the Mirena IUD, you are likely not going to have a period. But with the copper IUD, you can have a really heavy period. You can have longer periods until your body normalizes. And I was like, well, this is an obvious answer. Sign me up for the Mirena IUD. Because remember, I had these awful periods as a kid. The last thing I wanted was to go back to like awful periods. And she handed me the pamphlets and said, go home, read about it, see which one sounds better to you. And when you come back to have the insertion, you can let me know which one you want. I was like, okay, sure thing. Took those pamphlets, put them in the garbage. And I was like, this is a no-brainer, because I was putting my trust in the person that was selling me my health, right? Selling me a bill of hormone health. And it wasn't completely 100% explained to me. And I did not do my due diligence to research even more. So at the time, when I am beginning to hit my burnout phase with my career, my body is like, hey, what is going on here? I decided that like, hey, what do I need to do differently in my life? I wasn't 100% ready to hang up my shoes quite yet when it came to running, but I started exploring what my career looked like. I realized a lot with interventional radiology that I was focused on sick care. I wasn't in healthcare. I was in sick care. We were helping patients that were sick. And this really came to light for me when I progressed through my career. My first 6 years as an IR tech was at a children's hospital. And then I expanded and moved to, I worked at a couple different hospitals after that were adult-based. And being in the adult world really showed me how much diet and lifestyle and environment can impact your health. And so I was just beginning to really see this kind of evolve and unfold before my eyes. And I'm like, I don't feel like I'm really in healthcare anymore. I want to be on this preventative side of things. So I started to get curious again around, what does my career look like? I met a friend of a friend who was going to school at the Nutrition Therapy Institute in Denver to become a nutrition therapy practitioner. And I was like, what is this? I have never heard of a nutrition therapy practitioner. So I met up with her one-on-one. We chatted about it. I did a webinar with the school to learn more about their program. And I was like, this is it, 100%. This is what I want to do. This is how I can help people still be part of a healthcare, quote unquote, healthcare system, but be on that preventative side to really help people understand how to support their body just by doing small tweaks. At this time, my own personal journey with food and nutrition was growing, evolving, unraveling. A lot of the stories around how I feel my body was starting to shift. I was eating more whole foods based, and I was really noticing how my body was responding differently. Before that, I was dealing with a ton of bloating, a ton of constipation, so much gas, a little bit of acid reflux. I was passing the Tums bottle around with my friends all the time whenever we went out, which is not normal. And so I got curious about that and started trying different things, eating a little bit different, learning a little bit more about what my body was telling me. And I was like, gosh, I feel so different when I feel my body differently, that I really want to help people feel better in their body too. And so that's when I started my journey to become a certified nutrition therapy practitioner. So through this whole transition of things happening, I also decided, I don't know if being on birth control is still part of my journey. I feel a little disconnected from my body because I had been on some type of hormonal birth control for 17 years at this point. Now I'm at the age 35. I'd been disconnected from my menstrual cycle. I, again, had that Mirena IUD, so I wasn't really bleeding, maybe just a little bit of spotting here and there. And that's because two things. The IUD, the progestin in the IUD, is a synthetic form of progesterone. And what it does is it thins that uterine lining, so it makes it not a hospitable place for implantation of a fertilized egg. It also makes your cervical mucus thicker, so it doesn't allow sperm to swim through as freely. And in a lot of women, it can disrupt the actual communication between the pituitary and the ovaries and disrupt ovulation. So a lot of women don't actually ovulate when they have that hormonal IUD in. So contrary to what my doctor had told me about, like, hey, this hormone is just going to stay very localized in your uterus, it doesn't. It was systemically felt throughout my whole body. So I decided maybe it's time to stop this birth control. I was having all of these symptoms when it came to my gut health. I was having a ton of breakouts, like deep cystic acne on my face. So I had my IUD removed. I had that first withdrawal bleed. And then I think I probably had like a regular period after that. And then all of a sudden my period was missing. It was MIA. And I was like, what is going on with my body? Like, I was having 45-day cycles, 65-day cycles. I was having these really long cycles. I was not pregnant. So I was trying to understand what the heck was going on. I sought out the help of a new doctor, one that I did resonate with when I first met with them. And we explored a lot of what was going on. We did a lot of hormone testing. I was going every other day in my luteal phase for a while to do some testing. We did a full hormone panel, including my thyroid. And what we discovered is that I had hypothyroidism. And so they suggested that I start a thyroid medication. And I was like, I have a lot of questions though. As I mentioned before, I had now was in school to become a nutrition therapy practitioner and was learning a lot. And so I just wanted to know, like, why is my thyroid being underactive? Why is it not producing the hormones that it's supposed to right now at the amount that it's supposed to? And so I wasn't ready to just start a thyroid medication. So I sought help from a new practitioner. I met with a new naturopath. And I worked with that naturopath for about 2 years. And that's when I had my very first Dutch test, the dried urine test of comprehensive hormones, in which we realized my hormones were in the garbage. They were depleted. My whole body was depleted. I was not ovulating. I had not ovulated on that cycle. And so we started navigating that whole process. And through that process, I had questions. Of course I had questions. And I was like, could I have PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome? And that naturopath said, no, not likely. You don't fit the typical look of somebody who has PCOS. And I was like, but I have like all of the symptoms of PCOS. She's like, I don't think so. So I worked with that practitioner or that naturopath for 2 years and wasn't really seeing a lot of positive changes in my hormones. They were kind of still pretty depleted every time we tested them. And we even tried topical progesterone, like a little bit of HRT to support my body. But I was still not having results. I still felt pretty awful. So I found a new practitioner, did a deep dive, started over the whole process again, and told that functional medicine practitioner that, hey, I think I might have PCOS. And they said, I think you might as well. So we did some tests, and what do you know? Finally, at the age of 38, I get a diagnosis of PCOS. Yes, I don't fit the stereotypical look for somebody who has PCOS, but you really cannot judge what is happening with somebody's health by their appearance. We have to do a deeper dive. So that explained a lot to me. That helped me understand a lot of these messages and a lot of these signals that my body was sending me. I was able to move from these very long 45 to 65 day cycles to now I have a period every 26 to 32 days. I still ovulate, I track my ovulation, and this is even with navigating into now the very early stages of perimenopause. There have been some shifts, there have been some changes, these very early signs that, hey, perimenopause is starting. I'm 43 now, so we are in the decade of when women are typically reaching menopause. That is what perimenopause is. So this whole journey has unfolded a lot for me. I had so many profound realizations. I realized that, you know what? My body isn't broken. My symptoms aren't random. No one had ever taught me how to listen and understand my body. Now I look back and like I have hung up my shoes for running. Every now and then I'm like, oh, it'd be kind of nice to go for a run. And not saying that I can't. I totally can go for a run, but I have found other ways of moving my body. Maybe someday I will strap on those shoes and go for a little jog around the neighborhood. You never know. But it also has helped me to really start and grow what is now Be Collective Wellness. So I graduated in 2019 from the Nutrition Therapy Institute in Denver as a Certified Nutrition Therapy Practitioner and began a business to help women navigate through all of these challenges that they are having when it comes to the nutrition side and sometimes these missing pieces. I'm being the bridge. I'm filling the gap between your medical practitioner and where you want to be. I'm helping women navigate through some of these things that are very confusing and very nuanced. Nutrition is very nuanced. I'm very passionate about helping women advocate for themselves and empowering with their food and nutrition. I'm looking at nutrition holistically, the whole body and how it responds to nutrition, lifestyle, your environment, all of those things that are going to impact. But on top of that, Be Collective Wellness, the name of my business, my nutrition coaching business, is about the collective. Wellness is not just the way you move your body. Wellness is not just the way you eat. It is not just the thoughts that you have. It is a collective. So from Be Collective Wellness, where I do my one-on-one nutrition coaching and functional lab testing, which I'm always growing, learning more with additional certifications in hormone health, digestive health, blood chemistry, and now also in school to get my bachelor's in holistic nutrition. So continuing to learn and expand so that I can help my clients in so many different capacities. That all laid the foundation for what is here today, the birth of Healthy Buzz. This podcast was something I've always dreamt about. I want to create a platform where women can get their questions answered. They can learn about all these things that maybe were a little bit hush-hush, right? Like, oh, periods were such a bad thing to talk about, but it's not. Periods are very natural. Your body, the functions of your body are very natural. Everybody poops. I talk more about poop and periods with my clients than I have ever talked about in my entire life. And it has really sparked me to open this conversation up to more women, to have more people have access to this really important and valuable information. So Healthy Buzz is going to provide you with holistic nutrition advice that cuts through the noise and validates the female experience. This is where science meets soul. We're going to be redefining what these nutritional norms look like for women. You can expect interviews with various guests who are experts in their fields. I'm talking things about, I'm going to have guests on from HRT to airways and functional dentistry and PMDD and endometriosis, grief counseling, all of that stuff, because wellness is not a one spot, it is a collective. So I'm really excited to have you here to listen to this podcast and to help build this community. So stick around. There's a lot to talk about, and I'm so excited to have you. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Healthy Buzz. I hope this conversation has left you feeling seen, supported, and ready to take the next step in your health journey. Love what you heard? Make sure you subscribe to Healthy Buzz so you never miss an honest conversation. And if you found this valuable, please take a moment to leave a review. I truly appreciate it. For exclusive weekly tips and holistic strategies, be sure to subscribe to my weekly newsletter. The link is in the show notes. Remember, this isn't just nutrition, it's permission to trust your body. I'll catch you on the next episode of Healthy Buzz.